Imagine standing in a kitchen in ancient Syria, around 1721 BCE. On the table sits a ceramic jar. When you open it, a sharp, spicy aroma fills the air, a scent that does not belong to the Middle Eastern desert. Inside are dried clove buds. They do not grow here. They do not grow anywhere nearby. The clove tree Syzygium aromaticum grows naturally only on a small cluster of islands in the Banda Sea, within Indonesia's Maluku archipelago. From there to Syria lies more than 7,000 miles of sea and land. Before steamships existed, before accurate maps, even before Europe knew Southeast Asia, a single dried flower bud had already crossed continents. That reveals an important truth. Cloves were never just a spice. They were a passport, a commodity valuable enough to activate an early global trade system. Their unique geographic origin turned a fragrance into a reason for empires to sail. The Maluku Islands were not a grand center of civilization. They were small volcanic islands, rich in minerals, imide, and shaped by stable monsoon winds. These specific ecological conditions created the perfect environment for clove trees. But the key factor was not abundance, it was limitation. For thousands of years, cloves grew naturally only on a few islands, such as Ternate and Tidore. This phenomenon is known as geographic endemism, when a species exists in an extremely narrow region. In modern economic terms, it resembles a supply chain with only one global supplier. What was the consequence? Every civilization that wanted access to cloves had to depend on a single point on the map. When a valuable resource has a single address, it becomes a strategic target, not because it is inherently dangerous, but because it creates an imbalance of power. Whoever controlled Maluku controlled the supply. And when supply is scarce, value multiplies. This was no longer botany. This was geopolitics. Long before Europeans arrived, cloves already had their own trade routes. Southeast Asian merchants transported them along Indian Ocean sea lanes. Arab traders then took over, moving spices to India, onward to the Middle East, and into the Mediterranean. Each leg of the journey added another layer of intermediaries, and each layer increased the price. One reason cloves survive such long voyages lies in their chemistry. Their high eugenol content, a phenolic compound with strong antimicrobial properties, helped dried buds resist mold and microorganisms. Unlike fruit or meat, they did not spoil for months. This natural self-preservation turned cloves into a form of portable wealth light, durable, and extraordinarily valuable per unit of weight. In medieval Venice, cloves were worth nearly their weight in gold. They served as diplomatic gifts, ritual objects, and sometimes even as a means of payment. One aroma, operating like currency, and in a world where information traveled slower than the wind, that value was amplified by mystery. By the 15th century, Europe had fallen into dependency. The Ottoman Empire controlled many overland trade routes, driving spice prices higher. Cloves became symbols of luxury and power, but also of reliance. Portugal's solution was not negotiation. They sought a direct sea route to the source. After rounding the Cape of Good Hope, Portuguese fleets entered the Indian Ocean and eventually reached Maluku, but they did not arrive as peaceful merchants. They came with cannons and coercive treaties. Soon after, the Dutch established the Dutch East India Company (VOC), a trading organization with its own army, navy, and treaty-making authority. Operating almost like a sovereign state, the VOC did not merely purchase cloves, it enforced monopoly through military power. To maintain high prices, they even destroyed clove trees on islands outside their control. Scarcity was no longer a natural condition. It became an economic strategy. We often say the age of exploration was driven by a thirst for knowledge. In reality, it was driven by flavor and profit. In medieval Europe, food preservation technology was limited. Meat was salted or smoked, yet still prone to spoilage. Cloves did more than add flavor. They masked unpleasant odors, and partly inhibited bacterial growth thanks to eugenol's antimicrobial properties. But their symbolic value mattered even more. When a noble family used cloves at a feast, they were not merely seasoning food. They were displaying access to global trade networks. The aroma became a signal of status, much like a luxury watch today. Spices from Maluku appeared in Christmas pastries, mulled wine, and religious ceremonies. They transitioned from Eastern ritual goods into Western culinary standards. Luxury became normalized. And when luxury turns into habit, demand surges, fueling ambition to control supply. The spice wars did not just enrich Europe, they reshaped Southeast Asia. Control over Maluku led to treaties, population displacements, and the reorganization of local power structures. Small islands became imperial flashpoints. Administrative borders were redrawn according to trade interests. The flow of goods reshaped the flow of power. Even today, the map of modern Indonesia still carries traces of that era. Maritime routes established for the spice trade later formed the backbone of regional commerce. A single dried flower bud triggered a chain reaction that lasted for centuries. Cloves were never meant to launch navies or create multinational corporations. They were simply the defensive chemistry of a tropical tree. Yet, within a context of scarcity and ambition, they became engines of exploration, conflict, and the redrawing of the world's map. Human history is not written only in ink or steel. Sometimes, it is guided by invisible molecules drifting through the air. And on a small corner of Indonesia, a single aroma was once powerful enough to send two empires to sea.